Fortunately, there's not an Ajanak one.
All right.
Because I didn't want to...
You got some big superstars there.
Yeah, I didn't.
Nice. I like the touch, actually.
Thank you. I didn't want to sacrifice an Ajanak record with blue.
You good?
Ninder, how are you?
Yeah, listen, I've been listening to your stuff. It's good.
Thank you. You've always been a great supporter of mine, right from the early days. Back in 2015, I started.
Wow. And it was something, and it's interesting. It was no, it wasn't new, but it's quite an innovative concept for people to get. Now, of course, listen, it's commonplace now.
Yeah, everyone's got a podcast.
Just shows you ahead of your time, my friend.
Yeah. I was there in the early days. I remember telling people about podcasts, and they didn't really know what the term meant. So yeah. I eventually said, it's online radio.
That's right.
Then eventually got it. But you was one of the early guests, I remember. So that's what, nearly 4 or 5 years ago now?
If I recall, it was in London.
It was in London, yeah. You was at some highbrow event.
Yeah.
You had your tux.
Well, obviously, it was so highbrow, I can't even remember what it was.
Your team were winning an award or something, or you're nominated for an award.
I just can't remember what it was now. I just can't remember what it was. But you good?
I'm good.
And how's the transition up north?
Good. Yeah, it's good. You know what? It was tough the first few years. Outside of my comfort blanket of Gravesend in Kent, and obviously all my friends are still down there, and so I've uprooted really. And I've settled in now. Haven't got many friends up here, but now I've got Zoom.
Yeah,
so I can keep in touch.
Quite extraordinary. It's quite extraordinary what technology now allows us to do. It's fantastic.
It is unbelievable. I mean, like me and you having this conversation now. You're at home, I assume, and I'm at home, and here we are. And it works. It's pretty clear. There's no lag time, and
it will get better and better and better.
Yeah. So, do you think this is going to be the future? I mean, I wanted to get you on to talk about business and how the future is going to be for all of us, really, in life in general. I mean, there's a lot of changes. A lot of businesses are going to suffer. There'll probably be some businesses that won't survive after the lockdown. A lot of jobs are going to be lost. But in there could be some glimmers of opportunity for people, new types of companies and businesses and innovations. So, I mean, for yourself, obviously, you keep your eye on these kind of things. So what are your general feelings?
Well, look. I went through, if you recall, way back in 2007. I'm talking about the music industry. So we went through a similar episode, but the difference was our business model just got torn apart because we were quite content selling CDs and cassettes. And then up popped Napster. Then we had the mobile phone. And suddenly the future did not look as bright as the day before. Whereas here, most businesses will survive. A few won't. But at least, so from my example, one of the things I do is big events. They'll survive because people still want to meet, despite having Zoom. Despite having these products, as human beings, we're engineered to meet and to see each other in person. So I'm not facing oblivion, but in 2007, my business model was redundant, and we were facing oblivion. So it depends all on context. Depends if you've been disrupted before. Before it was a technological disruption. This time it's a disruption nobody anticipated. And my fear is that, and hopefully we won't, that a human tragedy doesn't become an economic tragedy. So that's going to be where government comes in and entrepreneurs come in and businesses come in to ensure that, for the majority of people, when time goes past, we look at it as a hiccup rather than, something that really brought society down. So that's going to be down to how, and we've heard the word animal spirit, how strong the animal spirit is.
Yeah.
And of course, for those who are seasoned, they'll have seen this type of recession that we're now all predicting. That comes every 10 years. So it's, every 10 years, the market shakes itself. Some people lose, some people win. And we also know recessions are when entrepreneurs and the next set of huge businesses are born. So, it's more evolution, the old go, the new come. And I suspect the same will happen here. There's classic examples. We're talking through Zoom. And now his share price has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Because, everybody and people who offer similar Zoom type products, they've gone through the roof. Anybody who's doing digital, and that's online, so Amazon have gone through the roof. Anybody selling, I think even Waterstones was saying, that they've got a physical shop, their online sales have been fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think those who, the high street was under stress anyway. There was a structural stress, people were buying online, but now more and more people have gone online. I think the latest figure I heard was about 10% is online. Well, there's still 90% to still exploit.
Wow.
So lots of opportunities for people with new products, new ideas, a new paradigm, a new future, and those who excel, can adapt, and think of new things will excel. Those who, and listen, I was one of them in 2007. I said, hold on, nothing's going to replace the CD. Well, unfortunately it did, and I was like an ostrich in the sand, and I refused to see things around me. And one of the things I say to entrepreneurs now is, it's good to know about your industry, but actually it's better to know about things nothing to do with your industry. Because that's when you'll spot the next threat. Because if you're too close to your own industry, you won't see the threat. And of course, what makes this unique is that it affected everybody at the same time globally. I think that was what makes this different. And most people got affected one way or the other.
Yeah. And I think because it was a global pandemic, supply chains were affected. So countries and businesses found out if they over-relied on another country, they were going to struggle. So I don't know, maybe in the future they're going to look at being more self-sustaining and prepare for maybe not rely on one country too much, i.e. China. And because if something happens to China, it has become like the factory of the world. And if that factory closes, the knock-on effect is unbelievable. We're looking at, PPE for the NHS staff. It all sort of trickles back to places like China and Turkey. And then if you have a problem like this, which no one expected was ever going to happen. You get political issues, but they usually get resolved because money talks, and they could come to some kind of agreement. But when it's something like this, people do start realizing that, maybe we have to look at being more self-sustaining, maybe look at our manufacturing lines and how we've got Brexit somewhere around the corner as well. How do you see businesses adapting to that?
So a couple of things. Let's just backtrack a bit. So we knew there were problems in January, February, because the businesses who were buying from China were in trouble because China was in lockdown. So a lot of products weren't coming over. So that's when the first panic station started. That we've been relying too much on China. The products aren't coming in. And people were reducing their workload. People were being told to come in 4 days a week, 3 days a week, because they couldn't get the components to make the thing. So the car industry was affected even then. The components weren't coming in. So that was the first sign. Then, of course, as it hit this country, we realized we couldn't get hold of PPE because that was also coming from abroad. So suddenly it affected us. It affected everybody then. It wasn't no longer just a business problem. It was a society problem. And of course, then people started to ask the questions, well, hold on, why are we not producing this stuff here? And let's not forget the Industrial Revolution started in the Black Country, in the West Midlands, where this was the workshop of the world. This is where everything was being made. And of course, what this country, like others, didn't see the global threat from China, back to ostrich. You don't see things going around. They didn't prepare for it. And in fact, this country went through a process of what I call deindustrialization. So actually, we took the industry out. And one of the reasons why the OECD said this country will probably suffer more than most from the pandemic in terms of the recession is that we are consumer-led. So in other words, we're not manufacturing-led, we're services-led. And services mean people. And if people are in lockdown, then it's going to affect you. So I think it's been a process. And so people say, well, we should what we call onshore. In other words, bring the products here. But of course, the problem is there's two things. You need resources. One is a financial resource, so you need to throw a lot of money in. But secondly and the more key element is the manpower resource. So if we've been going through a process of deindustrialization, we've been losing those skills. So if you decided tomorrow, I don't know, you're going to open a factory making widgets, but actually you've got nobody knows how to make them.
Yeah.
You're pretty stuffed, really. So I think the long-term strategy, not short-term, I think the long-term strategy is to build up skills. And of course, we've heard some heart-wrenching numbers in terms of youth unemployment and unemployment anyway. So maybe there's now an opportunity to retrain them into perhaps some of those industries. And of course, the other thing that what digital does is digital means that going forward, you can't predict the type of jobs that are going to emerge. You have just absolutely no idea. Such is the speed of change. You're educating kids now, and when they leave, they'll have probably forgotten what they learned in the first and second year, if not the third year. And are there the jobs there for them? Have they already forgotten what they learned? And should we be training people for the future? And so people say, well, what if the future is so uncertain? How can you train them? If you can't envisage what those jobs look like, how can you train them? Well, I think you train them to be all-round great individuals, people who can build creative skills so they're transferable, because if they're creative, they can transfer those skills. People with great communication skills, great people who understand all kinds of things around the world rather than one black and white. And if you can build that culture of creativity, innovation, free thinking, open-minded, embracing everybody's views, then you could probably compete with the best purely on creativity. So I think the individual of the future has to be different from the individual from the past. But actually, you can't predict the future. So we shouldn't be packaging individuals for a future that may be nothing like they've been trained.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really interesting point you made about looking at the future and education, and the way we teach children could massively change as well. So now we could have children learning Spanish. My oldest is learning Spanish, and a teacher is sending over a recorded video of him speaking Spanish, and they repeat back. And you could learn Mandarin from someone in China, rather than
Well, it's a couple of things. So one of my big gripes, and you'll definitely understand what I'm about to say, is the emphasis in education is tick box. So as long as kids leave and can tick a box, a qualification, they're sorted. So you're producing a lot of people with great qualifications but little skill. There's a difference between the two. And the gripe I've got, which you'll share, is that for that, remember that creative individual I'm talking about, that all-rounded individual that can transfer the skill set from one place to another, so can adapt to a situation, they need to be really rounded. So that means an individual shouldn't be just great at maths and English and whatever other STEM subjects, but actually have the ability to be creative. And the best people who are really creative and very good at things are the people who study and are very good at music and arts. Because music and arts forces you to create. You have to come up with something. That's the very skill set that may come into play in the future, to think outside the box. And some of the greatest physicians, some of the greatest scientists were hugely accomplished musicians.
Right, yeah.
They were actually brilliant at music. So interesting, isn't it? Some of the most brilliant musicians then became the best scientists, the best surgeons, and the best physicians. And my other problem with education is the kids of today learn in a different way to us. So I don't know about now, but if you tried to get me to sit for 3 hours in an exam, I'd say that's virtually impossible. And I think I, like the kids of today, learn in a different way. I'd rather listen to a podcast, you speaking to an economist, than having to read his book. I'll probably learn more by listening to the person. And there's a great example, a friend of mine, he went to Spain and his son was kicked out of the Spanish school. So an English guy, kicked out of Spanish school, and the school said, it's hopeless, it's a waste of time. He can't learn what we're trying to teach him, so we boot him out. So he came home, his father was pretty distraught, and he said to his dad, don't worry, just give me a year or so, and I'll sort myself out. And he said every morning, so his son would come down, have his breakfast, he'd disappear into his bedroom, not to be seen. And then a year later, roughly, he came down and said, oh, I've done it. And he said, what have you done? He said, I've learned the latest in CAD-CAM through YouTube. He's now one of the highest paid architectural CAD-CAM designers on robotics in the City of London. He learned in a different way to the way we think people should learn. And if someone's got that creative bent, don't put them in a box when actually they want to go and do something else. So realize people's potentials, and they may not fit the way we've been told they fit. And I think, so that's the kind of future you need, a different future with a different set of outcomes. You just need individuals that can transfer those skills to whatever the future. So they've got to be flexible enough to flip between whatever comes. So listen, we spoke right at the outset, you mentioned the word podcast. Some people say, what the hell's podcast? 10 years ago, you'd said most people would graduate and think about setting up a social media agency. You would have said, what the hell's a social media agency? If you'd said back in 2004, people will be streaming music, not owning it, they'll listen to it, and they'll put it back to where they got, in other words, Spotify. They're happy to rent rather than own, so they're happy to listen to it, put it back, and then move on to another track, listen to it, put it back. You would have laughed. If somebody said to you, because of 5G, there's a potential of self-driving cars, you'd have laughed. If you'd said somebody's going to get you into space, you pay them $100,000 or whatever it is, £250,000, and you can actually get into a rocket and go to the moon, you'd have laughed. So, and the rate of change is so quick that really we've got to produce those type of people going forward, because they're the future.
I mean, it's interesting when you're talking about podcasts, like obviously 5 years ago when I started, there wasn't many Desi podcasts for a start. I think it was one of the first ones, and there is now. There's a lot more. There's a lot more voices out there. But if you look at some of the big podcasts like Joe Rogan, he's recently been signed to Spotify exclusively, and so now for about $20 million. I mean, he's top of the tree. But then you see someone like Spotify who's going to try and buy that market and control podcasting, and they're going to take some of the big players with them, and they're going to take some of the younger younger guys as well, and kind of control them. Sometimes I worry about things like that, the independence of these kind of voices and how much control someone like Joe Rogan can say, well, no, I choose who comes on my show, who doesn't. My show is my show. I think he's got a licensing agreement, but when these big corporations with a lot of money start buying up the smaller players, it can be tough. But I think your point on education and how education has changed, I know obviously when the Industrial Revolution came, there were they were teaching kids to be kind of factory workers. You know, you go into school, you've got a uniform, you have assembly, you all sit in a line, you have your 15-minute break in the morning, you have lunch, you have 15-minute in the afternoon, and then you go. You know, it's kind of training them to think of like a factory worker, basically. You know, and we've continued that way on. You know, and children, like you said, don't all learn in the same way, and like adults don't. And I think if we need to find some different ways. Some of the top YouTubers, some of their videos are absolutely unbelievable. And when you ask them how they learned to edit films and film YouTube, they learn off YouTube to be on YouTube. And it's absolutely crazy, you know. And I think online education, I think if someone can devise some kind of app where you look at what language you want to learn, you can be put in touch with that person in that country who speaks the language, pay them whatever it is, a monthly fee, and they'll teach you that language. Education online is going to be big. And I think health is another one. Going to the doctors could be, 10, 15 years, maybe less. Could be a thing in the past. You put down your symptoms. The algorithms will work out, because if you look at a doctor in his lifetime, he may look at this in a guess, obviously, 3,000 x-rays in his lifetime. An algorithm's going to look at 1 million in seconds, and it can compare, and they're testing that already. That'll be coming in soon. And these service industries of people working in shops, like in supermarkets, we already saw self-service tills. You've got the Amazon store supermarket where you don't even pay. You pick up your trolley, put in your cucumbers and your salad, and you walk out, and it scans it and it charges your Amazon account. And they said, well, wait, are people not going to steal things? And they were saying, yeah, they may do, but it's a loss that we can take, but majority of people won't. And that will be the future. I mean, the convenience of walking in, putting things in your basket and walking out without queuing up to pay. I mean, these kind of innovations are here. We say that it's the future, but they're almost here. It's scary almost to think what's around that corner, because even though we're going to be in a recession, almost guaranteed, there's going to be people out there, these entrepreneurs, these special-minded, creative people, who are thinking of ideas. Oh, why don't we try and do that? A bit like musicians making that song. Why don't we try and do that? Put that key in there, play it on that key. Well, that don't sound right. Get that instrument, and to get that product out there. I'm quite excited as well to see what's coming around the corner. Well,
look, I'll give you some examples. So, just picking up yours. So, I remember last week my printer wasn't working. I had two options. Either I'll go and find the box and then try and find that written document.
You cut out a little bit.
What you do, you go into YouTube, job done. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So I think I was saying something about a printer. Did you catch that?
Yeah, you started. It's a little bit unstable. 1 second, mate. It'll click back into when you start moving. You can hear me, obviously?
Yeah.
Yeah, your screen's just frozen at the moment. Can you talk?
Am I back on? Yeah.
Your screen isn't. But yeah, you was talking about printers.
Yeah, well, my printer was not functioning properly. So instead of doing the normal thing, which is you go and dig out the thing that comes with it and to read it all up, I just went into YouTube and we fixed it. And these are things that are changing. You do your guarantees online. I can't remember the last time I read something that came with an electronic item. You just go to YouTube. But you were talking about the doctors, so I spoke to somebody in the NHS, and they said, when we said to doctors, can you talk to a patient through video? They said, the doctor said, no, we need them here. And yet for the last 3 months, they've been doing precisely that, because they knew that they couldn't let the patients in. You can now see not having to get up in the morning and try and book a doctor's appointment. You just do it by video. Job done. And we got, of course, the 5G coming, which will be amazing stuff. So you can imagine with 5G, which means we won't have the problems we're having at the moment with Zoom. With 5G, it'll be just very quick. With 5G means everything's in the cloud. With 5G, you could get into your car before you leave. You can find out there's a car park with a space. You can book your car park in the and then drive straight to it. So that means there'll be less people driving around, less congestion. Less congestion means less pollution. You can imagine, and I know this they're trialing, is somebody's just been knocked down. Instead of waiting to get into the ambulance and then try and get through the traffic to the hospital, the consultant at the hospital can be sorting the patient out on the curb, in the ambulance. Some of the surgery could be done before he even gets to the hospital. They're driving to the hospital. The notes are all sorted because it's all 5G. They know exactly what this person is. They know all these problems, his allergies and everything. And you're on your way. And you could imagine being in a football game with 5G. You could repeat the goal on your phone. You could get all the stats on who's playing. It's remarkable. And if even in a manufacturing outlet, each product could have a sensor. So at home, your fridge could tell you 1 month's notice, this part's about to go. You better order your part. I know in the events game, we have to sometimes talk to our printers for brochures, and they occasionally ring and say, the machine's broken down. But with 5G with sensors, they'll know a month before that the machine's about to break down. And instead of waiting for an engineer, somebody will fix it remotely.
Yeah, amazing.
These are the and so your person in the future, you said brilliantly, they were taught to go into school, they were taught to do A and Z, get to an assembly line, do A to Z and go home. The factory of the future will be run by robots. The factory of the future won't mean black and white. The factory of the future means that person who goes into that factory will expect to have the most amazing digital skills and will need to understand how robotics and artificial intelligence works. And it's how you train that person to be able to think outside the box. Yeah. Those manual jobs that are of a repetitive nature are gone because they'll be replaced by a robot. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the first time you heard the word spreadsheet? Well, before spreadsheet, people used to do it all by hand with calculators, but with spreadsheets. And the spreadsheet really was your first example of artificial intelligence.
Writing down ledger sheets and yeah. I mean, a lot of them jobs, obviously, you're right, and robots are going to do the menial tasks, the packing, the labeling. But this is where creativity comes back into play, because what a robot can't do is create that product from outside the box, something different. We've not got that far yet, with robots. Maybe someday we will. They might have some AI that can, but can they replicate the human nature of creativity? Will they be able to create Mozart or, a painting of Van Gogh? They could probably replicate it, but can they create it from nothing?
Now, this is where you come to the word diversity. So whoever's working for you, when you're thinking about the next product, whoever's working with you needs to understand how the consumer thinks and how society thinks. So the only way you're going to understand that is if you understand the consumer. To understand the consumer, you've got to be one of them. And you've got to understand what the consumer may want today or may want in the future. A robot is not a consumer. A robot won't be able to understand the innovation because a robot doesn't understand what a human being needs or wants. And most products come from a need or a want. So I'm afraid the robots have their limitations, but they are very good at taking away those mundane, low-skilled jobs. And I think so the worry now going forward, particularly post-COVID, is that most companies normally use a recession to shed labour. They normally do, because there's less resistance. And normally you'll see from a recession, that's when most automation happens, because they shed the labour because they're able to do so, and they automate. And that's what happens all the time. And of course, because of the social distancing, I think the robotization will happen even quicker. The challenge is, a real challenge for government is, particularly if you look around hospitality, the people who will be most hurt. So when they say COVID-19 doesn't discriminate, actually it does. And the discrimination happens with the people who are then made redundant, who are typically young, women, low educated, and probably the ones who can't get a job as quick as they could. So young, old, and the people with the less qualifications, and they're the ones who are going to suffer the most. So it does discriminate in its after effects, if not. And of course, there's evidence to say those people who live in poor areas do get the COVID. So it's a big societal challenge within which business has to play a huge role, because business, to a large extent, will determine what that future looks like going forward. And remember 2007, I didn't see what the iPhone was going to do. And the iPhone changed. Now, what I did know, once it affected us, I knew the video companies were in trouble. I knew film industry was in trouble. And of course, now we talk about Netflix, we talk about Disney channels, we talk about on-demand. And people like Blockbuster didn't see it coming and disappeared.
Disappeared, yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you talk about labour and work and sort of the lower income members of society. Do you think, I know they talk about this in America a lot, where there could be a class of unemployable people. So you've got, you had the upper class, middle class, lower class, but you could have a class of people who are not employable because they don't have any skill set useful for companies. They can't do manual labor because the robot's doing it. They haven't got the technical skills to program the robot, so they can't do that. And they're kind of, and service industries are going, working in a shop. And so I think there could be a point where we do have a class, if we're not careful.
Okay, so the challenge is twofold. The challenge is, and they call it the scarring effect. So the challenge for the young, the ones who've just graduated, is got to get them into something meaningful, because if you don't get a job within 3-4 years, you're scarred for life. The education system has always been skewed. So the people who are guaranteed to get money are the schools. So 0 to 16. Government always gives them money because they want to make sure. Then 16 and 18, there's some money as well. But 18 plus, you pay for yourself at university. Anybody beyond that is left on the shelf. So what government hasn't thought about or has been interested in is lifelong learning. And I think if the change going forward is going to be that rapid, then, and we spoke about thinking out the box and transferable skills, then those people need to continually train for an ever-changing landscape. So what happens, the landscape changes, but the people don't. So their skills don't relate to the future. Do you remember I said about the jobs, you can't see what they are? Well, you've got to train people so they can be trained. As things change, they train with them, change with them. So somebody came up with a fascinating, really brilliant idea. And he said, well, you do a 3-year degree at a university. Tell you what, tell them to pay for 2 years, then stop and get a job. And then maybe 10 years later, 5 years later, as society has changed, as industry has changed, they go back. That 1 year they're still owing. They then catch up and they do that 1 year because it's now relevant. Remember I said to you, there's a possibility after you've done your 3 years, actually none of those skills might be relevant. So actually do 2 years, hold one back, put it as a credit balance. And then when circumstances change, you need to retrain because it's a new world, you go back. So I think you're right. When you talk about the unemployable, what we just can't allow to happen, we've got to train these people.
Yeah.
We've got to train them and say, these are new opportunities. This is what you need to get into, and this is how we train you. Don't leave them now on the scrap heap. And I think we need that understanding of, if it's a changing world, then we need to train our people to change with it.
Yeah.
For that to happen, we need to have a totally different mindset. And instead of saying, well, at 16, thank you very much, you're on your own, you say, well, actually, once you're into 18, we've got to try to persuade business to keep training you. And to do that, say to business, we'll give you a tax break. Now, what that happens in the long term is you've got a better trained workforce, a flexible workforce, a workforce that's always working. And guess what they do when they work? They pay taxes. With those taxes, you go around again. So we really have only ourselves to blame if we end up with, you refer to them as the long-term unemployed.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. I've got a friend who studied for 3 years as a graphic designer. And he spoke to me the other day and he goes, well, yes, most of the stuff I learned at university, you can do it on an app now. So you got just people randomly, on their app making graphic designs, logos. He goes, they're doing it themselves. He goes, I trained 3 years for that.
Well, there you go. So I think, that's what's happening, and because technology is moving so quickly. And also that actually almost tells you how intelligent people are. The fact that they can learn that stuff offline, if that makes sense, or online rather, without having to go into into a place where they have to be trained. They can actually teach themselves. So we've probably got the cutest, the cleverest generation for whom technology is part of their DNA. They've grown up with it. We had to learn it. And they do things automatically that we don't. Yeah. And they create more ideas. They move very quickly. So I think we just got to accept that they're at a different pace to us, and they see the world through a different lens.
Yeah.
And something, they're dragging us into that place. They're dragging us and saying, we're going to take you with us because that's where the future is.
Yeah, and I think that pace of learning at school, you'll learn at the pace set by the curriculum and the teachers, and they're looking for their exam results to then get their funding, and obviously more pupils to come in to say, and the Ofsted score they're aiming for. It's almost like a game. You don't want to go down the league, so you want to be higher. But now, like you said, the younger generation are learning at their own pace and in their own style. And it is amazing what they can learn and what they can create just by in their bedrooms, and even
extraordinary.
Even coding, they're banging out websites left, right, and centre, and they're on Fiverr, young kids making websites in Pakistan, and they've got an internet connection, they've put themselves out there and they're making money, and this is that creativity. We keep talking about it. I mean, this whole interview has been about creativity, which is not surprising now you've mentioned it. It makes complete sense. But actually, I think people need to start thinking in that way, how can I make things better? I mean, I know Silicon Valley for a long time, even now, what they're trying to do is save time for people. Time is always a great commodity, like Uber saves you time, don't it? You're bringing up the taxi, you just look on your phone now and book it, and the nearest one will be there because it saves you that time, So if people can find ways of saving us time, I mean, I think businesses especially will have realised now if their workforce can work from home, I think that's going to continue, because why would they want to keep an office open with the electricity going on 24/7, getting cleaners in to clean it? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's interesting. I was speaking to someone today. So, as I said, we're in the events game, and so we've suffered. But equally, if somebody said, well, how did I benefit from this sort of fallow period? Well, benefited in one huge way is, if I'd said 3 months ago, so we're taking our event to India, Delhi, in 2022. If I'd said 6 months ago to 3 entrepreneurs, listen, can I hook up with you on Zoom? One, they would have said, what the hell, Zoom? Second, they would have said, get stuffed, you have to come and see us. But now suddenly international travel will change, because now actually you can talk to people in Zoom. I don't have to now go for 2 weeks. And now, in the scheme of things for the next 10 years, whatever I lose over 6, I'll make it up through sheer productivity. And maybe in London, now I don't have to go and meet someone for one particular meeting, just catch them on Zoom.
Yeah.
The difference being for the real big deals that you want with people, you want to see them face to face. But I think back to the doctors, back to people meeting, I think life will change. I think for some industries that they'll be changed forever. So I think a lot of people, Twitter made the proclamation, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, any Twitter employee can work from home for life. And so I think that will change. Those people who own properties in the city centre, will now wonder how many people are going to go back to the office. Those people who supply those kind of people, sandwich shops, have they got a future left? Because those people who used to come into those offices don't come out at lunch because they're at home. What's the future for them? So does the high street change again? Does it become for people to live now? I've had a few of my friends who were thinking of buying a property in London to be closer to their workplace. But actually, if they can now work from home, why would they spend a fortune buying some? So I think transport will change. We talked about autonomous vehicles. That will change. And I think how we run our lives, how we learn, I think education will now change. I think then going down the blended approach. But I think more people will learn online. And I think the only thing I think we should all get used to is the fact that the future will always remain uncertain. The new norm is that it'll always be uncertain. I don't think you can say today's new norm is here. It will always change. The new norm is totally uncertain. We'll be run by sensors and cameras, and people will be able to predict things. I think the one thing we can't predict is what people want. And the classic example was Mr. Jobs. People didn't say to him, can you give us a mobile phone that can do this, this? He just knew that's what they wanted. And a robot can't replicate that as well.
It's amazing because I think with Steve Jobs, a very unique man, and he has definitely made a dent in the universe, what he aimed for. I mean, I think he was trying to make the iPad first, and someone showed him the touchscreen, and he said, hang on, we can make this into a phone. And that's where it started. He goes, well, scrap that. Let's stop making the iPad. Let's make a phone. And, the rest is history. But them kind of people are unique. But there are new Steve Jobs out there right now, as we're talking. They're concocting these ideas. Some of them will be successful. Some of them won't. I mean, the tech, Silicon Valley and all tech industries are very fast. The pace in which they work, they will deploy something, an app, and then refine it as it's being deployed. So things can change within 6 months. Something could come out and it can change, so we can't predict the future, but I think the workforce and how we work and how we interact for work, at least, is going to change. How do you think that's going to affect relationships in the sense of business? Like you said, has always done kind of face to face, that handshake, that sort of gentleman's agreement, and you look someone in the eye and you're going to, I think them kind of things will change, but we can never miss out on that physical interaction of meeting someone. And
so a couple of things. So people have said to me, what does the future look like? Look, there's three things. This is pretty well documented. Now I heard today's figures, and I know it's after the weekend, so the figures tend to be low, but the general trend has been going down. We hear that there's a vaccine on its way because they've already started manufacturing. Someone guesses there must be a level of confidence. We've heard there's a drug that, if you're in a critical stage, could be used to reduce mortality. So things seems to be going in that direction. We've spoken about that new norm will be the way people travel and work, and more at home. And with 5G, these Zoom things will be even better. With 5G, the way you communicate people will be much more crystal clear. 5G means you'll get through first time, the latency will be low. And so, we're in this world where things are moving very much quick. But business has always been about people. Whether you're selling a product or buying a product or devising a product, it's always been about people. I think once R is down to zero, a vaccine is in place, and we've got drugs that can sort you out, I think people will return to meeting people. Now, I'm hearing the 1 meter distance restriction is pretty close. So I don't know about you, but generally when I speak to people, I'm normally about a metre away anyway, to be honest with you. Yeah, 2 meters is. And I think...
A meter's enough for me. That's close.
Yeah. And I think human beings are engineered. That's why we call the word society. We socialise. That's what we call it, a society. And I think, worst case scenario, saying about a year, I think we'll be back to where we are. Somebody said to me, yes, but hold on. We've been hit with a pandemic once. What if another one comes up in a year's time? I think all governments from most countries have taken a battering. They've taken a battering. And I can tell you, they've probably already drawn plans up to put money aside and to monitor these things a lot more closely, to throw more money into science. So great science is getting an input into this, to be more predictive. And I think international leadership has been appalling because each country's done its own thing. There's not been this international thing together. Should we all move together? Should we all? You've got the States run by someone who doesn't believe in the World Health Organization, and and maybe that's why we didn't have that sort of global leadership. But I think people will have learned that we've got to keep an eye on this. We've got to put money aside, continue to invest as we go along, so that when it comes again, one, we squash it very quickly. We have a vaccine ready very quickly. And hopefully by that stage, they'll have an innovative track and trace system. Because with technology, you can do anything. So I think we will have learned a lot. As business people, we've learned a lot. It wasn't a total surprise to me because I've been there in 2007 when my business model blew up. But I think we'll be ready for the future. And I think one thing you cannot remove from human beings is the desire to meet another human being. And I think, yes, you might meet people once or twice and then revert to Zoom having met them. But the new norm will be the old norm, which will still be people will still meet. And they'll still want to meet, and they'll still want to celebrate, and they will still want to commiserate, and they will still want to meet and talk about the bad and the good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you're talking about countries around the world. There was such a drive for globalization, to make money, to consume. And then when the pandemic hit, it all became selfish. We're not going to, don't worry about them. Let's look after ourselves, especially. And then you're talking about America, and the world does look towards America for leadership. And when it's lacking, which it quite obviously is, it does send ripples to some other bad actors around the world as well, and who get a bit more, bit of a spine, thinking, well, we're gonna do it our own way then as well. And if you're not working as a cohesive global team, you can see what happens, and we can see by the numbers.
Well, in 2008, when we had that big recession, there was that international partnership. Gordon Brown did a brilliant job from the UK. Obama was on board. And if you think about what happened in 2008, there was complete unity internationally. And you never heard of any of this stuff. And it was all done, all the central banks worked together, all the governments worked together. They came to a decision collectively, the euro worked together, and the whole world sorted it out. This was the complete opposite. And even now you hear people rumbling on about when this vaccine's been achieved, who gets it first?
Yeah, yeah.
Who's going to get it first? Who's not going to get it first? And these are the people with the most money that are going to get it. So rather than worrying about let's get the vaccine done, people are already worrying about how it's going to be distributed. So, yeah, globalization has had its benefits. Look, most people around the world have benefited from globalization. You just got to compare to where people were 50 years ago. And yes, there are some great countries in poverty. A lot of it, I would argue, is down to poor administration from a political perspective. But the world is a better place. People have traveled globally. We tolerate each other a lot more because we travel and see other cultures. And social mobility is great, so people can travel to another country and make a better future for themselves and their family. So my worry is this the end of globalization? No, I don't think it is. The world's a smaller place. The internet of all things brings us together much closer. I think people can now bring talent from all over the place because of technology. You could input by that talent without them having to leave their country. So I think globalization will continue. I think there's been a hiccup. I completely agree with you. But also, if you become insular, in other words, think for yourself, then you don't let products come in. But then don't forget, you can't send products out. So unless you become self-sufficient, you won't have a market going out. And of course, let's not forget, UK is the sixth largest country in the world. We do have exports. So where does that leave us with exports? Where does it leave China with their exports? Where does it leave America with their exports? For a globalized world, I think the genie's out the bottle. You can't put it back.
Yeah.
And I think we'll just see that hiatus while people scurry around looking after themselves. But when the flights start working again, when international trade kicks off again, and when people continue to trade, hopefully on a free trade basis, where mobility is global, where education is global, where people are skilled are global, I think it'll go back to it again. There will be just that little pause while people reset the button.
Definitely. I mean, you've mentioned 5G quite a lot and the R rating. Do you not think them two things are connected somehow?
Right. That made me smile because somebody asked me that question. So let me take you back to the railway age, when the railway started. And when they were building the railways, there was an epidemic in this country. Not a pandemic, but an epidemic. And everybody blamed it on the railways. So when you come across something you don't understand, when you come across something that you think is uncertain, the natural instinct is to attack it and to blame it for everything. So when COVID came, they didn't understand it. Somebody mentioned 5G. They didn't understand it. And just like the railways, they put the two together and bang. And we had all kinds of problems with masts being torn down, set on fire. And what these people didn't realize that actually what they were doing, they were damaging the communications on which the emergency services were relying on. And so it's quieted down now. And maybe again, because COVID's influence is going down, there's less deaths, people are a bit more relaxed. So they're now no longer looking for those scapegoats. And so somebody tried to put one on one together and came up with three. And well, anyway, that took us to that period. But, you can't stop progress. You couldn't stop the railways. No. I remember Henry Ford came up with a fantastic quote. He said, if I'd gone and asked people what they wanted, they simply would have said, we want faster horses.
Exactly.
Because that's all they know. And so when people do remind me of 5G, I just remind them to the railway age. And I said, when they were building the railways, people didn't want the railways. They didn't understand them. And they just blamed all the deaths, the epidemic, to the railways. No correlation at all. But yeah, you're right. It's been a major PR challenging people's misconceptions and their fears.
Yeah, I mean, all them crazies anyway. I mean, once all these 5G towers go up and we're on 5G, we can see the speed. They'll be on YouTube looking at the next conspiracy theory on bloody 5G.
And that's what makes you really smart, because they're finding that information, on WhatsApp, they're seeing the information on Facebook, the very same things that 4G and 5G allows them to do.
Exactly. I mean, who can predict humans and their craziness at times? I mean, I think it's a natural reaction though, because this pandemic, when you can't control something, this is how conspiracy theories, I believe, arises. Yeah. When something major happens, like a 9/11, Princess Diana dying, JFK, it's such a big event that humans almost can't put it. How can Diana die? She's not really of this earth, and 9/11. How can they fly into? How can towers fall? So they try to make sense of it. And the only way to make sense of it is to come up with some kind of storyline which fits their own narrative to make sense. Sometimes these things just happen. It can't always be a conspiracy theory. Who knows, Ninder? Me and you might be completely wrong, and we're getting fried by 5G or something. I doubt it very much. Look, the world's changing, as you said. Education will change. The ways we work will change. For yourself personally, and all the businesses that you do, your events, music, and what's your future plans for yourself?
Well, interesting. So for those who don't know, I have I come from a music background, so we've seen an interest in the music, which has been interesting during lockdown, both in terms of people playing videos from the Ajanic days. I played tabla with the band, and we still sort of perform. We've also seen an increase in digital downloads. Naturally, you'd see that. We've also seen, interestingly, an uplift in CD sales. So it's interesting how that part of the business, the entertainment side, and we talked about Netflix earlier, and we talked about Disney. So how the online and the entertainment sector, online particularly, has done well. But obviously people who do concerts and things, it's been the reverse. I also have some properties, and it was interesting to see how that would be affected, and whether the people who have their business in there, so their commercial properties, whether that would be affected. There was a bit of a stumble, but they've all sort of recovered, which is a great sign. So I'm hoping that will do well. The bit you're referring to is the event side, which has been totally decimated. And my fear for those in the hospitality sector, and obviously it depends on whether the 2 meter goes to 1 meter, and whether the hospitality sector can survive. And my fear there is for the very people who work in these kind of places. Some are on 0 hours, some are students who are filling in between their studies, some are women who can go in between 9 and 3, and then so I fear for them. For me, on the event side, we had to cancel Wolverhampton. Actually, it's taking place this Friday. It was going to. We're just about to pull the plug in London. We think Leicester might still happen. And then that takes us to Birmingham for the Signature Awards. So we do the Signature Awards, we do the Natural Entrepreneurship Awards, and we do the Natural Business Awards. And in 2022, we're going to India and potentially Pakistan and then South Africa. So really what my mission really and my purpose is to encourage wealth creation, is to encourage entrepreneurs to innovate, to create new businesses, to employ people. Because I'm of the belief, if everybody has a job and everybody has a purpose in life, you have a fully functioning society. Society only breaks down when people have either no jobs or no future they can look to. And that could be because business isn't supplying those jobs, or the education system isn't supplying the people that business needs. It could be the political landscape is broken. That influences both education. So what I try to do through my events is the sort of 3 key things. So we have a bit of learning, and normally we have a great keynote speaker who will talk about one of those things. Because I think an economy can't operate without a economy can't operate without a flourishing business sector. I think it just doesn't happen. So we have a learning aspect where we talk about all these things. Then we have back to the human beings, we have a connecting element. So with 500, 600 people in the room, they connect with other people. They talk about how they can make society better. They trade with each other. And the third element is a celebration element. Again, the human bit, where you celebrate and acknowledge those who have done well in business in that 1 year. So really our mission is to make the world a better place through better business, through better education, through better opportunities. And society only benefits if everybody has the same equal access to those opportunities. And I think society won't function unless it has a business that operates ethically, works closely with all its stakeholders, and everybody benefits. And that's always been my driving force behind the events. And we've spoken about it all. Actually, everything we've spoken about today is the kind of things we speak at our events, how to make the world a much better place. And of course, for business, how to give back.
Yeah, and I've been to a couple of your events. Fantastic they are too. I had a great time. I had an idea the other day, and I thought I'll bring this up with you, of all people that I've interviewed, for the artists out there, because they can't play live in shows and gigs, maybe they could do kind of an acoustic version at home. And they could sell tickets for a $5 or a $10. I mean, I would pay to see some artists if they could have the setup where they're not just sitting at home on Zoom playing, but have good connection, internet connection, have good lighting, and they can get interaction with the fans. So they can do, requests, song requests, and they can, birthday shout outs and that kind of thing. Imagine doing that with some of your favorite artists. I'm not just talking about Bhangra Asians, but all our Western artists as well. I think that could be a way that they could generate money. And I would pay £5-10 sitting in my comfort of my home, listening to, say, Gurdas Man, and I'll say, Gurdas Baji, can you do Challa? And he could give a shout out. And I think that could be a way that could work.
Well, a couple of things. I saw today that somebody's putting on a series of driving events. So you can go to a concert in your car, and you have a slight area where you can mingle within your area. I'll tell you what I think about online in a second. I came across, I can't remember who the artist was, but they did 2 sets. One was in the UK, and then they played the same set for the US. And what they did was they hired out a theatre, and luckily this person was a songwriter, a singer-songwriter, so they didn't need lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 5-6 camera shoot, because obviously to get all the angles. And normally that one show, they probably would have had 800 in the room. It was a proper conventional theatre. But because of this setup, they reached 6,500 people.
Exactly.
Much wider audience. So I can make the exact comparison between a CD and a digital download.
Mm.
So when we were producing CDs, so let's say we were selling to Malaysia. So the CD would be released Friday here. It'd be transported to Heathrow Airport over the weekend. It would then probably go on a plane or something, and it would get into Malaysia the following weekend. Somebody would then pick it up at the airport there, get through customs, and then it would be released the following weekend. So you've gone to 2 or 3 weeks between a product being released here. Of course, but with digital, the world gets it at the same time. But now here's my big but. Human beings are engineered to have experiences.
Mm.
You can't beat a live experience.
Mm.
And I think the reason people go to big 100,000 stadiums is to be part of that experience.
Mm.
And to see and hear something you're not going to get a chance every day. It's the exclusivity of the event. It's the chance to share that moment with 100,000 other people. And it's to be able to pay for an experience you just cannot replicate the day after unless you go back to the same. So I'll give you a classic example. I had the good fortune. My niece, this is many years ago, my niece said, I want to go and watch Michael Jackson at Wembley.
Mm.
I said, let's go. And do you know something? You could give me the best DVD. I don't care how many cameras you had on there. You could give me the best surround sound. You could not beat being at Wembley Stadium and watching Michael Jackson come out of a rocket, and then half the set you saw him climb into a tank, and tigers came and all kinds of things. I shall never forget that. Now, the luck was, we heard a couple of days later there was extra tickets. Guess what? We went again to watch the same show, but with a different 100,000 people this time. So I think, you said to me, what does the new norm look like? I think there are certain experiences you just cannot replace.
Mm.
There are certain ways of greeting someone technology just can't replace.
Mm.
And doing that deal, you can't replace it with technology.
Mm.
And as much as, yes, I mean, I think what it allows us to do is look at the world differently in the fact that you can now consider a hybrid product. You could make the best of both, but I don't think the one replaces the other. I think it could probably support it. But I think, listen, so I've been to many concerts, and just to be in the room and to experience that in the room cannot be supplanted. I don't think it can be supplanted by technology.
No, definitely not that experience. You know, you remember the Michael Jackson concert. I went to see Oasis and other bands, and you just can't beat the old Wembley as it was, and you just can't beat that experience. So, I mean, things are changing. Obviously, the music industry, the few people that I've spoken to on this show, I said, well, how did you record this song, you know, with lockdown? He goes, well, my producer's in Canada. I sent my guide vocals to him via WhatsApp. He sent back a sort of demo. My lyricist is from India. It's a complete global production, and that definitely can happen. You know, you could definitely get producers from all over the world, and even I always tell people if they want to start a podcast, do it, because even though I've interviewed people from the UK, now I have Zoom. You can see what's coming around the corner, right? I'm going to be interviewing people from Canada, America. We've got someone from America coming on, and obviously then you've got places like India. So that's the aim for me, and I can do that now because obviously before I was traveling around meeting people, and I can't do that. But they're the opportunities that are out there that we should all try and utilize.
I think what technology has allowed us to do is democratized distribution. So everybody can now distribute their content. We don't any longer need big institutions to help us. We can all become our own PR media company. And technology, you talked about YouTubers, technology allows anybody to achieve whatever ambition they set, because we don't need those institutions anymore. We did used to. They used to be mapped out. You go to the school, you get your education, you do this many years at this place, lifetime employment, you then retire and you die. And it was all laid out. And it was all very institutionalized. And somebody always told you what to do and where to go and when to retire. 65, bang, here's your clock, off you go home. But of course, in today's world, and particularly the way we live, that 65 has gone out the window. Who says it's 70? Who says it's 75? Record companies are not as important as they used to be. You don't need PR companies. You can do your own PR. You can produce your own track at home. You don't need to go into an expensive studio. You can distribute your track. Remember that example I gave you earlier about trying to ship CDs to America? So in America, you need distributors. In Malaysia, you needed distributors. You don't need distributors, and you just need an aggregator will just knock it out for you. So all the platforms are there for anybody to achieve whatever they wish to put their mind to. There is nothing to stop anybody doing what they want. The tools are there. They never used to be, but they are there now. And I often wonder, when we first set up a Johnny back in 1989, how would have we fared, roll forward, if we had all those tools at our disposal and the opportunity to sell worldwide instantly and nothing stopping. I still remember, I mean, you can now download tracks, but in the old days, you'd have to first make sure the high street was open so you could make your way down there to buy whatever you wanted. You hope they had the item in stock. Then you hope that at least there's a few songs you like on a CD because you couldn't buy the constituent parts. Then you had to come home and make sure the thing you were going to put it in worked. And then, of course, if you missed the 9 to 5 slot, you'd have to wait for the next day or the next weekend. And you tell kids that, and they can't understand that consumer journey at all. And I think what the record company and the music industry did was it failed to recognize the new customer journey, failed to recognize that. It failed because it was so dependent, I was part of it, on looking just at ourselves and not technology in the outside world. So I say to people now, if you're going to mix with people who are better than you, because you should look to learn. Always mix with people better than you. Always mix with people who are different to you. So don't mix with the people who look like you because you're all going to think the same. Try and mix with people who are different to you, people who look different to you, people who think differently to you, people who think better than you do, and look at their background and make sure you have nothing in relation with that background because you're going to learn from that different background. And if there's more different to you as possible, the more you'll learn, and the more they'll learn from you. So I think for too long, listen, it's not our fault if we grew up, say, with kids who look like us, and then we went to school and they look like us, and then when you're going to interview your next person who walks through the door, you're gonna engage with the person who looks like you because that's all you've ever known.
Yeah.
That's all you've ever known, is to mix with the people who look like you, and that's when society doesn't integrate properly. That's when people are not accessible to the same opportunities, and that's when we have what we call groupthink, and people tend to think the same. Innovation goes down, and society goes backwards rather than forwards. And that's what I say to people: always seek out people who are different and better than you.
Yeah, it's interesting how groupthink still remains, even though we're so connected worldwide to people from all different backgrounds, and they don't look like me or you, they're from different countries, different languages, different foods. And we're much more willing to accept people when they're on the TV screen, maybe. But when we meet them personally, that personal interaction, we still got that sort of mindset of safe in what we know. It's a very odd thing. It's so deeply embedded in us, I think. It could be something to do with DNA, or when we were cavemen, we had our little tribe, and don't talk to that tribe because, they've got a different type of hair to us, and who knows?
Well, look, we're all born to achieve. We all come into the same world, but something on that journey changes us. And I think the thing about children particularly is they certainly have no baggage. They see no risks. They'll do anything. They'll try and, climb up a tree even though it's impossible. Whereas as we get older, we see risk a lot more. We become a lot more risk averse. Innovation and creativity starts to decline, and we put the shutters up around us. But if you take children, honestly, they will do anything because they don't see it as impossible. You'll see them go onto a wall, and you think you're going to fall off. They don't think like that. They think, oh, this is just a wall. You might be 10 foot tall, but I'm going to walk along it. I'll try this and I'll try that. So somehow we've got to keep that creative spirit through those years and make sure that they mix with the right people. And back to my transferable skills, when they leave school, they're a much more rounded individual, a much more open individual rather than a closed one. And I think you spoke about Brexit. Listen, I think most people are. I think the first 4 or 5 weeks people were in denial around COVID. Some people were angry. Some people couldn't believe what was happening. Some people sat back and reflected. But from a business perspective, everybody's been channeled into sorting this crisis out. I'm not sure business is now ready for another one. Trouble is, the second crisis, if there is one, is man-made.
Yeah.
Pandemic wasn't. So it's whether people have got the resilience, whether business has got the resilience to just about limp over this crisis and suddenly go into the next one. But something that's, again, I spoke about the stakeholder engagement, business, politics, people, society, community, all come together, all mix together. You can't isolate one from the other. And it all now depends on individuals, human beings, egos between various countries, and their ability to sit down, to rationalise and think of the greater good rather than the groupthink or what's good for me. And I hope, whatever the next few months look like, the people in charge, the people doing the talking, see the big picture and not revert to nationalistic ideology. Because I think we're just about now limping out of a really perilous state that we were all in. And of course, I think one of the positives always with a crisis, and I can't remember who said it, was it Winston Churchill or somebody said, never to waste a crisis. Something always good should come out of a crisis, when you learn something from it, or new ideas come in, or new ways of working come in. And I spoke to somebody in the council, one of the local councils, and they said, we're going to be able to do things we never thought were possible. because people are on a different wavelength. And I think we'll see technologies emerge that we thought were never possible. And I think we'll get people thinking around ways we never thought were possible. So I think, we don't like crises, but it's how humans now benefit and make use of a crisis, and should never lose a crisis. You make what you can out of it. But, it's one thing about human beings is they are unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's the one thing we can't predict. And it's interesting, I always try and watch the stock markets, and they're as bad as irrational as everybody else. Because they, again, they're run by, it doesn't matter how many algorithms you have in the stock market, it's still people make those decisions. And you see the erratic way in which markets move, that's because they're driven by people. And you asked the question, how will business react? Well, we don't know what that looks like at the moment. And we don't know how much of that is people trying to outthink the opposition. And we won't know until one, COVID plays out. And of course, it's where the government has the capability of running two crises at the same time. The COVID crisis and what comes out of Brexit. So time will tell, but, it'll be major decisions. I hope for the best. I hope and plan for the best. And I hope that the negotiations are fruitful and that everybody benefits from it. But I think the one thing we mustn't forget, whether we have COVID or whether we have Brexit, we still have long-term issues that we need to sort: education, transport, all these long-term infrastructure projects, long-term problems we have to do if we are to avoid some of the problems you've referred to.
Well, look, Ninder, you left it at a positive note, I think. You see, you're a glass half full kind of guy, right? And
got to be. And sorry, just to interrupt. I think anybody who's an entrepreneur or runs a business, their whole DNA is run on optimism. You have to be an optimist. You have to be, and you have to see the positive side of everything. And sir, I met too many people who dwell on the past, who dwell on negativity, who can't project forwards. And unfortunately, they're the people who then never, ever realize their potential and never achieve the greatness that I think we're all capable of. So I think you should always be positive, always think front foot forward. Listen, I'm completely different to my wife. My wife reflects quite a bit. She works with me in the business. And if I've made a mistake 5 minutes ago, it's gone. Honestly, it's gone. Because I can't change what I did 5 minutes ago. But I can certainly influence what's going forward.
Well, that's fantastic. Ninder, look, it's been great talking to you.
Likewise. Well, and you're looking well?
Thank you. Not much to do up north, is there? So it's always.
Listen, the north has an identity and a culture of its own.
Yeah. Oh no, I love it up here. To be honest, I kind of did what you say. People that got houses in London thinking we need a house near our work, and I kind of didn't really. I could work anywhere, so I thought, let's move up north where it's a bit greener, a bit more open, and I can stretch my money a bit further with my house, and my kids were young enough, so I made that decision, and it's been great. So that's why I did it. But thank you. Yeah, you're looking great. You look the same. You never age.
Okay. That's the beauty of Zoom. You can never say what the other person really looks like.
Yeah, until you meet him in person, you think, hey, I need to deal with him.
Absolutely. Well, listen, have a good one. It's been as usual. It's been great chatting to you. And it'll be interesting where we're going to be in a year's time. It'll be fascinating.
Well, let's do one thing in a year's time: is meet up again, or if not sooner.
And we can compare notes.
Let's see see how wrong we was about 5G.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ninder, pleasure as always.
Cheers. Thanks.